and then I would move on to the final segment of the episode. Well, it's not an episode, it's a whole series. But yeah, if you want to do that before I move on to the final segment, if you want to, yeah, make another point or say something else.
Yeah. Here, I kind of want to touch on like the crypto ethos a bit. Actually, so one other thing I'm going to say is because this situation is like shined a light on what's been going on, a lot of people, especially younger people, who see like the reality of what's going on, and it becomes obvious to them that like this whole boogeyman of like, you know, Muslim terrorists is like just a facade, and then they see the suffering that the Palestinians are going through and how resilient they are. It gets them curious, like what, especially like specifically the idea that like they have like stronger faith in God than like almost anyone else. And, you know, in a situation where most people would lose faith in God, that like, oh, how can God exist if he's allowing like all this stuff to happen to me? In the light of that, like the Palestinians, in fact, have more faith in God than anyone else, because they know that, you know, God's justice is on their side because they're, you know, they were the oppressed. So there's this whole new trend of like these younger people like making TikToks, like reacting to like learning about Islam for the first time. And like they, you know, just in like a minute 30, this like white girl like just schools everyone about what Islam is actually about, you know. So it's like, and that's the thing, it's like not, you saw like the book too, it's like way shorter than all the others, and it's like people think it's like super complicated or confusing, but if you actually read what it's about, you can see. And this has actually like helped a lot of people come to like open their mind on what it actually is.
So, if you must fight, then strike only at those combatants who attacked you. Do not attack women.
What was it?
So
Making me want to read it.
Yeah, you should.
If you must fight, then strike.
It's actually interesting. A huge portion of the Quran is directly addressed to the Jews or the children of Israel. And so like, you know, again, it's like not about these different religions. It's like all the same religion.
So, if you must fight, then strike only at those combatants who attacked you. Do not attack women, children, the elderly, or those retreating in their places of worship. Do not cut down trees or kill animals. Fighting against aggressors is allowed regardless of their faith. Fighting innocents is prohibited regardless of their faith. The Quran makes it clear that men and women are equal before God and before the law. If there are any abuses against women that are cultural practices in Muslim countries, they contradict Islamic teachings. Islam guarantees the freedom of non-Muslims to practice their faith as well as protection for their places of worship. The Prophet said, "Whoever harms a non-Muslim under the protection of Islam, I shall be their opponent on Judgment Day, and they will not even smell paradise." Quran teaches 3 types of brotherhood. You have your brotherhood in humanity, all humans being equal. You have your biological brotherhood, your siblings, and you have your brotherhood in faith, your fellow Muslims. If Judgment Day arrives and you have a seedling in your hand, plant it regardless, and don't waste water even if you live by the river. The Prophet prohibited polluting water sources and promised a heavenly reward for planting trees to feed animals, birds, and humans. He taught that a good deed done to an animal is like a good deed done to a human being. The Prophet prohibited the use of live birds and animals for target, the killing of animals for sport, slaughtering an animal in front of another animal, and forbade overburdening animals and underfeeding them. Best among their believers are those who are best to their wives, and that paradise lies under the feet of the mother.
Years of unending.
So like that is like the polar opposite of what most people think Islam is about.
Yeah, I was just saying that like it's completely opposite of what people think that Islam is about.
Yeah, and the ironic part is like the Israel is a side that's quoting religious scripture to justify violence and killing of civilians, which is like the thing that they say that they're fighting Palestinians for. And again, it's this like investment in anti-Muslim propaganda by the West and the US, which, you know, again, has been fueled in part by Israel's influence on the US, where there's another, actually, let's go to one of these like comedy skits. So there's the same guy made a skit on like 9/11 and the war on terror.
I've been attacked. Oh no.
So the US says I've been
okay,
attacked.
Buddy? Who'd hit one of us? I know, right? All we've ever done is bring a bit of
Britain,
culture and keep
the other
the
guy's
peace.
Britain.
But seriously, who was it? Mainly that guy. More drinks. Right, let's get him. Are you stupid? He's rich and powerful. We do business with him. Oh, yeah. So what are we going to do? Isn't it obvious? We're going to get him and him. No one gives a shit about them. We get away with murder.
He's talking
Were they
about
involved?
Afghanistan and
Vaguely,
Iraq.
Not at all. Good.
So like Afghanistan,
We get away with
vaguely
murder.
involved.
Were they
Iraq,
involved?
not at all
Vaguely,
involved.
Not at all. Good. And why will we say they attacked you? We'll just make something up. They hate our freedoms or something. That's not why we don't like you. The problem is you hate ours. Sorry, no, but why are we targeting them? Hello? Keep up, old timer. Have you forgotten all the cool stuff that they've got hidden away that we could use? Oh, yeah. We'll just beat them up and bleed them dry. I'll get away with anything now. Yeah! Will it take long though? I mean, I'm still a badass, as you'd hope, but I'm not quite the fighting on the beaches, streets and hills plucky young lad I once was. Nah, piece of cake. First, we'll take him down. That'll be over in no time. Then, I'll destroy him again. We'll beat him to within an inch of his life, thrash his house, and then charge him through the nose to rebuild it. It's a win-win. Listen, man, I did some pretty bad shit in my time, but this all seems a bit... Either you're with me, or you're with... I don't know, man. Well, if you don't, I'll tell everyone you're just a tired old has-been who started to shit himself. He's got a weapon!
So that's basically what happened. You know, the whole weapons of mass destruction lie to like kill all these
Just like the plot
civilians
of
in Iraq. That, and like it's hilarious because Iraq literally had nothing at all to do with 9/11. It's just like they just like you pick a random, you know, country of colored people to like attack to make it look like we're doing something. And in fact, actually, the one thing that they accomplished in Iraq was extracting oil and giving it to Israel. So a lot of Israel's oil came from Iraq. So, you know, that there's always that conspiracy that the whole war on Iraq was like kind of egged on through like Israel influence on, you know, US politicians.
There's so many other rabbit holes like on the US side and spreading freedom and yeah, spreading freedom and extracting oil basically.
Yeah, for sure.
So much. But okay, so let's recap basically what's going on there. So if I got it right, Gaza is this open air prison basically that nobody's allowed to enter or exit, and they're cutting all the resources and bombing the shit out of it under the guise of like bombing terrorists, but actually dropping huge bombs that are not targeting Hamas, but like just destroying the place and the parts where there are most people. Did I get it right? And is there anything else to add about like the current situation?
Yeah, pretty much right. I'd say like, so one of the most recent developments is UNRWA. So UNRWA, UNRWA, is like the #1 aid organization in Palestine. It was started right after the Nakba in 1948 by the UN to provide aid for all the Palestinian families that were displaced by Israeli settlers. And so it's been operating for, you know, since 1948. And there's like, it has like 30,000 employees or something. And so right after, if you guys heard about the genocide case of South Africa in the International Court of Justice, made a case of genocide against Israel for like, not to make a verdict on whether they're committing genocide or not, but to implement intermediary measures or like immediate measures to stop ongoing genocide, to then evaluate if it was genocide before anything continues or not. And in that case, like right after they made the verdict that on 11 of the 12 points that, yeah, like there is probable cause that Israel is committing genocide, and Israel, you know, it was like all these 12 points in terms of like must stop like anyone supporting like genocide, or, you know, it must not get in the way of providing aid and all this stuff. And so immediately after that, Israel released like this report that 12 of the 30,000 UNRWA employees were involved on the October 7th attacks. And they released this to like all the Western governments and told them to like pull the funding for UNRWA. So I think like $500 million in funding was pulled from the number one aid organization in Gaza due to a claim by Israelis that 12 of its 30,000 employees were involved in October 7th. So the US, Europe, like all these Western countries, they pulled all their funding. And so like think about what that means. It's like the one organization that is able to help the people in Gaza is now defunded. And the claim that Israel made is without any evidence whatsoever. They provide zero evidence. They just said this, and just on their word, all this funding is pulled. And if you think about like when is that a normal situation? And so by the way, UNRWA did not know it was, and once they found out, they fired those 12 people immediately. So like cutting off aid to the entire organization just because 12 of the employees might have been involved on October 7th is just Israel's way to again starve the people of Gaza, remove all resources and aids, like make it as unhospitable for them as possible. And so you can see after the genocide case, like instead of just like bombing the shit out of them, they're finding these other ways to like cut off support in a way that makes them look like the good guys, because they're saying like, oh, UNRWA like supports terrorists, even though it's like such a small fraction of this huge organization. And even then it's without any evidence provided whatsoever. So for them to pull funding in like the most urgent, dire humanitarian situation ever, or not ever, but I mean in our current time, that's like insane. But that happened, and so there's way less aid and support for the people of Gaza now, and people aren't talking about it. They're still just talking about, oh, how could UNRWA have possibly done this, and not seeing that this is just Israel's ploy to cut off more or justify more aid being cut off. And there's like there's pictures, or there's they literally bombed the food trucks too of like UNRWA. And there's like pictures of the bombed food trucks like not being allowed to enter. And so like they just say like we gathered intel and this is our conclusion. They didn't present any of the evidence, but they're still like believed. So the again this is again the Western world is just like happy to launder these lies, and to they say even the left leaning or kind of like liberal, like they do the lip service of saying that they don't want to see the Palestinians die and they want a resolution to this, blah blah blah, but all the actions point in the opposite direction.
I've heard people say like, okay, so like this is true, like they've been the Palestinians have been oppressed, and then this has resulted in Hamas, and now Hamas is this terrorist organization that is fighting against oppression, but they're like killing children and like they're doing all of this bad shit. And now even though like the Israel is the one who caused it and is the reason all this shit is happening, I do believe that like Hamas needs to be stamped out, and like this needs to be like, that's the only way to solve this. And how do you respond to that? And like what do you think is like the actual solution to this whole mess?
People who say that the only solution is to stamp out Hamas are basically saying the only solution is to like stamp out all Palestinians. Not that all Palestinians are Hamas, but it's essentially saying that you expect these people to not resist as their eyes are being gouged out. Like if you, let's say, even if you were to eliminate every current Hamas member through some miracle, if the status quo continues of Gaza is under a blockade and, the people there have no hope for any future and they're being continuously bombed and killed without provocation, there's Norman Finkelstein goes through all, Operation Protective Edge and Operation Cast Lead, where, unprovoked, Israel just rolls out these like routine assaults on Gaza and its civilians. If you're saying that you expect those people to like lie down and have their eyes gouged out and not react, that's kind of just, you're again detached from humanity. It's in human nature to resist that. And so you're missing the actual problem, which is you have these people in a concentration camp and you're bombing them.
Right, and like even if you did stamp out, like what happens then is that like Israel just continues pushing on, and like they keep converting more people
Yeah,
into
they'll but you
activity
can't.
and like well,
It's they've been trying to stamp them out for the last 3 months, and they've made like no progress whatsoever. In fact, they probably created more Hamas than they've destroyed. And again, this whole narrative falls apart because Israel themselves says that that's like getting rid of Hamas is not their motive. It's to take over all that land. The real motive is like the ethnic cleansing to make sure it's like a majority white Jewish population that lives there. So in fact, Israel funded Hamas when they had the elections. Israel, like the IDF, literally delivered suitcases of cash to Hamas to bolster them and their support over the more moderate opposition to Hamas at the time in the election. And so there's like videos of Netanyahu saying like, oh, we need Hamas to exist to continue to like justify being able to take over the land. Otherwise, we don't have any reason to do so. So yeah, here's like the video of them.
It's what allows them to portray themselves as the defensive forces, the victims, whereas they actually have their own end game.
Yeah, so if Hamas. Like no human being should see what's going on and think that there should be any other solution other than giving the people that don't have their human rights their human rights. There can never be peace until there's justice. Peace isn't just not violence happening. Peace is it's not like peace isn't the absence of violence. It's a quote from somewhere, I don't know who, but peace isn't the absence of violence, it's the presence of justice. And there's never been a bigger injustice in modern time than what's been done to the Palestinians. So if you care about peace, then it's the only path to that is holding Israel and everyone who's engaged in and complicit in the genocide accountable under international law for their crimes, and for reparations to be paid to the Palestinians, for the 1967 borders to be returned, to abolish the settlements in the West Bank, and this is where it gets complicated, quote unquote, because they've built all these settlements in a way that like it's impossible to like divide the land cleanly. It's like a checkerboard of like a grid, and so they didn't make all these steps to make the solution more and more impossible, so that the only path forward is like their path of complete annihilation of Palestinians and wiping them off the face of the earth, ejecting them to like wherever else, and complete takeover of the land. And so like here's a video of Netanyahu bragging about how he deceived the US to destroy the Oslo Accords. So he's visiting a family in a West Bank settlement and like just talking to them. And this guy is like recording him, and he asks the guy to turn off his camera, and the guy turns it off and then turns it back on a bit later, and he records that conversation. So I'll narrate it because it's in Hebrew. He says turn off the camera so we can elaborate on this. A few minutes later, the camera is turned on again, and Netanyahu begins to speak without quotation marks and without masks. Netanyahu says, now we're beginning to understand the meaning of the slogan, Yesha, Zekan, Judea, Samaria, and Azar here. Yesha is everywhere. What is the difference? What does Arafat want? He wants one big settlement. Yes, that's what my daughter-in-law from England says. They see Palestinians as settlers. So yeah, like in these Israeli minds, they say, oh, the Palestinians are settlers, where are the natives? Like they stole our land. So the Arabs are preparing for a war of terror, and they think that this will break us. The main thing, first and foremost, to hit them hard. Not just one hit, but many painful, so that the price will be unbearable. The price is not unbearable now. A total assault on the Palestinian Authority to bring them to a state of panic that everything is collapsing. Fear that everything will collapse, that's what we will bring them to. And then, so the woman interrupts him and says, but wait a minute, at that point, the whole world will say, what are you occupiers? Or, you know, the whole world will say that we are the aggressors. That's essentially what she's saying. So even the lady's asking him, oh, won't everyone see us as the bad guys? And Netanyahu's response is, the world will say nothing. The world will say we are defending ourselves. She says, aren't you afraid of the world, Bibi? Netanyahu says, no. He says, especially now with America, I know what America is. America is a thing that can be easily moved in the right direction. The Americans will not bother us. Let's suppose that the Americans will say something to us, so they say it. So what? 80% of the Americans support us. We have such great support there. What shall we do with this support? Look at the other administration of Clinton that was pro-Palestinian in an extreme way. I was not afraid to maneuver there. I did not fear confrontation with Clinton. I was not afraid to clash with the UN. As it is, I'm paying the price in the international arena, so I might as well receive something for it. Give equal value in exchange. But never mind that, we gave them things and we can't take them back because they won't give them back to us. First of all, Oslo is a system. So he's talking about the Oslo Accords. I do not know what can and cannot be taken back from Palestinians. This is a little kid, he's talking about political opinions. The lady's saying Oslo Accords are a disaster. He's like, yes, I know that and you know that, but the people need to know. And the lady's saying, but I thought the Prime Minister did know and that he'd do everything so that somehow not to do critical things like handing over Hebron. So like she's saying it's a disaster because like it's giving land to the Palestinians. So this is like during the Oslo Accords, like probably shortly after it or something. Netanyahu says, what were the Oslo Accords? The Oslo Accords that the Knesset signed. I was asked before the elections, will you act according to them? And I answered yes, subject to reciprocity and limiting the withdrawals. But how do you limit the withdrawals? I interpret the accords in such a way that will enable me to stop this rush towards the 1967 borders. So how do we do it? The Oslo Accord stated that Israel would gradually hand over the territories to the Palestinians in 3 different stages unless the territories had settlements or military sites. And that's where he found a loophole. It's like the Accord said, unless the territory has settlements, they just built more settlements. No one said what defined military sites. Defined military sites, I said, were security zones. As far as I'm concerned, the Jordan Valley is defined as a military site. So it's like all these values. So this is like the whole idea of like, oh, we're going to take over Jordan too, or we're going to take all these other areas. Like this is all in our self-defense. We have to create security zones. And so under this guise of like security zones, they're taking over more and more land. That was my quote, not what he was saying, obviously. And back to him. How can you tell? But the question came up of what defined what military sites were. I received a letter to me and Arafat at the same time, which said that only Israel will be the one to define what those are and the location of those military sites and their size. Now they did not want to give me that letter, so I did not give them the Hebron agreement. So he basically just like created all these like really ridiculous requests or demands in the agreement that pushed back further and further any process of, you know, those milestones being met. So he's like, oh, I'm only going to agree to like this rule on military sites if Israel is the only one that gets to define where these military sites are and their size. And that basically just renders the agreement null because it basically says Israel can just take over whatever land they want. And so obviously they disagreed with that. And then that gets quoted as, oh, the Palestinians rejected the offer of peace. They never rejected the offer of peace. And there was never an offer of peace in the first place. He said, I stopped the government meeting and said, I'm not signing. Only when the letter came in the course of the meeting to me and Arafat, only then did I sign the Hebron agreement. So he's telling them, oh, it's okay, I signed the Hebron agreement. It doesn't matter because then I stopped the Oslo Accord through this loophole of like, we can define all the military zones. And that's exactly what they've done. And since October 7th especially, they've been expanding this security zone using October 7th as justification. So these settlements, again, continue to expand further and further, shrinking like the land that Palestinians have. Yeah, so it kind of goes on. That's like the bulk of it. Is like talking more about that. But you know, the West Bank now. I'll show you another quick video. Here. Oh no way! Video's unavailable. Wow. CIA is
They
after
took a
me.
couple pages of the US playbooks as well.
In what way?
Funding.
Listen, you have to know something.
These, radicals for, not this like specifically, but like in general.
Yeah, for sure.
And then portraying as victims and to attack shit like that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. I can't believe this video is unavailable. It was pretty good. It was basically showing like the destruction of farmland is a huge thing too. If you know anything about olive trees, it takes 70 years for an olive tree to start bearing fruit. And so olives are one of the biggest like exports in Palestine, and there's like generations of olive farmers there. And so like taking away and the burning of these olive trees is one of the biggest kind of like destruction of nature and sanctity and livelihood. And you know, all these olive trees are in these settlements, so when they like expand the security zone, they tell that farmer like, screw off, your olive farm is ours now, you can't be here anymore, and he can't do anything about it. Yeah.
So what is